Look at how weedy it is in my garden after being gone for 3 weeks. I'm gonna get right on top of mulching this. Hello and welcome back to Wood Prairie Family Farm. Today I'm working on my garden west of the greenhouse. I'm going to be using my new broad fork and I really love it. I have an older broad fork which is wider with 2 handles, but this one is easier to use. You can jump on it with both feet still. It digs down into the soil and loosens it up. Also, it's got 4 tines, so I'm actually using it to make little holes for my little onion plants, which I'm planting into the bed here that's covered with old hay that I spread on the garden as mulch last year. I'm also going to be working on some seed snail experiments and along with some tips and tricks for you to use in your garden. So here I am using the broad fork in the first bed next to the greenhouse. I'm just loosening up the soil, leaving the mulch on top of the soil. You can remove the mulch if you want and put it back, but I thought it's easier than mulching around onions, which are really small when you first plant them. I thought I would plant right into the straw mulch and see how the onions do this year. So here I am with some amber onion plants. I've loosened up the soil. I'm planting those little plants right down into the soil in the holes made by the broad fork. You can step right on the broad fork with both feet and drive it right down into the bottom of the soil, right up to the bottom of the tines. Loosen it right up as you're going. Then I'm going to leave that straw right on top and plant my little onions down into the nice loose soil underneath the mulch. So I won't have to mulch. Hopefully I won't get too many weeds. I know there will be a few perennials come up through, but we'll have to pull those and hope to get this garden in shape by keeping it mulched on top and loosened up underneath. Keep removing the perennial weeds so that we have fewer and fewer weed problems as we go forward. That's the hope. These little amber onions are pretty tiny, but I carefully tease them apart and plant them down into that loosened up soil where I've got some holes made by the tines on the broad fork. As I go, pull out a weed here and there. I'm going to come back and plant the onions right down into that nice loose soil that's already mulched. And here is our onion bed. You can see that these little tiny little guys are all planted down into the loose soil and they're ready to start growing. I have a larger broad fork, but I'm getting smaller, and so I wanted a little bit smaller tool, a little bit narrower. I do like to broad fork because the rototiller and I just don't get along. The rototiller is probably not as old as I am, but getting close, and I would say it is, I'm more useful than it is. I just love this technique for the garden, especially a small garden. I've laid out my garden. This was my garden from last year, and I mulched it heavily with hay. I say I had a lot of help. So it's a little bit rainy, which would be a problem if you were rototilling or using a tractor, because the soil could get stuck together, smeared together and get compacted. But the broad fork doesn't hurt it at all. And the onions just love to go out in the rain, be transplanted in the rain when they're, low stress. It's cool, it's moist, and they just love that. You can work your soil with a broad fork a lot wetter than you can work soil with a rototiller because it's just putting some holes down in there and loosening it up. It's not smearing the soil. It doesn't compact the soil. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. So I hope my onions do good. In the last row in the garden next to the pasture, I'm putting a row of biodegradable paper mulch down, and I'm going to put a tunnel over my cabbages that I'm transplanting into this paper mulch. I like the paper mulch under the tunnel because it prevents the annual weeds from growing, and you can just know that your plants under your tunnel don't need to be weeded or hoed. They're growing in a beautiful, clean environment. Now the paper is eventually going to break down, but also the tunnel's going to come off. So when the tunnel comes off, when the cabbages get too big, I will just kick some mulch around them. You know, I'll mulch under them, cover up that paper, and they'll be beautifully protected from weed competition.
Today I planted my cabbages underneath this long tunnel to keep the bugs off of it. I think I have Swede midge, I don't know. Anyways, here's a peek at them, but we won't stay too long. We want to keep the bugs off them. They're on some biodegradable weed block paper, and we'll hope that that carries them through for about a month before it breaks down. Look at how weedy it is in my garden after being gone for 3 weeks. I'm going to get right on top of mulching this. But inside this tunnel that I put up for my broccoli and cabbage, look at how nice a job that paper mulch did, keeping the weeds down around those broccolis. And oh, isn't everything so happy? Look, it's got a place to grow where there's no weeds, no bugs. Just beautiful. All right, let's close this up before anybody gets inside. Night, night, little cabbages.
The seed snails. So here I am still doing some more seed snails inside the greenhouse. I just love this method. And one thing that occurred to me was that a little seed snail of started plants would make a really nice gift. So I'm going to start some cucumbers and some orchard baby corn. I've been doing a bunch of these little 4-inch tall seed snails as gifts, and they're just a really nice size. They fit nicely into the recycled pots. Doing some nasturtiums, some flowers, a couple of teddy bear sunflowers, and some cilantro. So I'm starting with a 4-inch wide biodegradable paper, putting a moderately thick layer of Fort V on it, and patting that down so that it will fit in my little pots, because that'll be handy to transport and gift things in. So I've got a little Fort V on there. I got some Market More cucumbers. We don't need a whole lot of seeds along here. I'm going to go with once every 2 or 3 inches, and we'll be able to transplant these plants out once it gets warm enough outside. The nice thing about the seed snail is that you use fewer seeds than if you're working outdoors. I'm going to mist those with a little water. Let's see, I've got the hose going in the greenhouse now. So what do plants need? They need good soil, they need water, they need air around their roots, so loosen up your soil. In other words, you can do things all different ways so long as you pay attention to what does my plant need. Most vegetables like full sunlight, but they all like a damp soil and soil that's had some compost worked into it, some fertility, and also some air worked into it. So here's my first little cucumber roll. It's a nice size, transportable, giftable. Find our marker and label that.
I like these snail rolls for corn, especially this orchard baby. I unroll it and just take off one plant. I just open it up and gently tear the paper. And that gives me a plant. I just plant the plant in the next place it's supposed to go. Paper comes right apart. Here, I'll show you again. Unroll that. Tear off a plant like as if it was a paper towel. Plant it right in where it's supposed to go. I put those about 8 or 10 inches apart. I like these snail rolls for starting corn. You can start them a little earlier. I just gently tear off a piece of the biodegradable paper, which is ready to pull apart, and take a plant or two and space it out in the row. You just gently cover the little guys up. Put them right to bed. It's a nice rainy day for transplanting here. Here's another good use for the snail rolls. I got some winter luxury pumpkins growing in this one. And they're sprouted nicely. So I'm going to unroll them a little and pot them up. And the nice biodegradable paper rips right apart. Nice piece there. Protects the roots in a little bit. So I'm just going to put him down into a pot and add some more dirt. So those, the roll comes apart nicely. Maybe we'll move along to this big one. Just keep the big ones. I've got more than I need. They tear apart real nice. I'm going to pot him up into a 4-inch pot. Leave him for another couple of weeks. And add a little more dirt to my pot. And they can grow for 2 weeks until the soil is nice and warm. Started 2 weeks ago. I have an update on the Quake lettuce in the corrugated paper roll versus the biodegradable weed block mulch roll. I see a lot more germination in the plain paper rather than the corrugated. Of course, that's just our first test. One question we did have was, how biodegradable is the biodegradable paper? And so far, it's holding together fine, equally with the corrugated cardboard. Both are going to rot as time goes by, but I think with a seedling that's not in the seed roll too long, we'll be fine with the biodegradable paper. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching us have fun in the garden. I just love working in my garden. We'll see you next time, and I'll show you how everything is coming along. Thanks so much. Have a great day.